talking about diversity and inclusion and empowerment in Japan. So please stay tuned. We will be right back. Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today we have Chuk Besher joining. He is working with Gree IT company, and they oversee the 3-minute media company. And today we'll be talking about a really interesting documentary film that you were producing. So thank you so much for joining today.
Good morning, Joy. Thanks for having me.
And I heard you went for a little swim this morning. Aren't you lucky?
I do. No water, no life is my motto. And if I don't swim in the morning, things can kind of get off the rails. So I insist.
Yeah, it's very important to exercise, especially now with coronavirus. You
Yes,
have to stay healthy, but also you have to have a release mentally, right?
that's right. And the water really helps me a lot. I'm a water child.
Yeah, wonderful. Me too, I think. Let's talk a little bit about your background. So you
Hmm.
grew up in Japan. Can you give us a
I did.
little profile?
Yeah, I was born and raised here of Russian refugee parents. My grandparents fled Russia for China. My parents fled China for Japan. They ended up here in the early 1950s, and my sister and I were born here, and we grew up here. I moved to the States when I was 14.
Yeah, I saw that in the NHK show
Oh, you did?
about your documentary, but also they were asking about you and talking about
Yeah,
you growing up in Japan. And
yeah.
then Japan Times did a great profile piece
Yes,
about
and
you.
yeah, I thought so too. Richard really writes well, and he did my parents' story justice, I think.
Yeah, that's a wonderful article.
Yeah.
I'll put the link below to the Japan Times
Oh,
article.
good. Yeah, I would like people to read that. Not
Yeah,
so much to learn about me, but to learn about the inherent diversity in Japan.
definitely.
Yeah.
And in the article, it talks about how you felt the gaijin-ness of growing up kind of as a Japanese, but not looking like a Japanese,
Mm-hmm.
right? Can you
Mm-hmm.
talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, sure. My parents had a kind of a Russian household. We had a grandmother, so we spoke Russian at home. But I had a Japanese nanny. She was taking care of me and my sister. And then I also went to Japanese schools. So I had this kind of like a dual sense of belonging and identity. Uh, but it was interesting that once I stepped out of the home and went to the school environment, uh, I would encounter this kind of more, less so now, but more so then, of oh, you're a gaijin, and that meant you're not from here or you're an outside person, and I had to battle that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think your growing up in that way in Japan has informed the way that you do your interviews or you seek out projects
Hmm.
like the ones we'll talk about today.
Right.
Do you feel that?
Yeah, I do. I think this experience of identifying with Japan and yet being defined as not of Japan, it got me thinking from a very early age, and it really defined my way of thinking and the way of identifying myself and others. And it also kind of spurred me to learn more about Japan. If I am told repeatedly that I don't belong here or that I'm not Japanese, although I have a Japanese passport and I speak the language, I think fluently. uh, all those things kind of made me want to learn. Okay, so then if I am not of this place, I am not of these people, then what is this place and what are these people? So I did go to study Japan very seriously in graduate school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you went away for high school and university, but you came back, is that right?
Yes, I was in Japan from 0 to 14. And from 14 to 24, I was in the U.S., high school and college. And then after college, I came back to work in Japan for about 10 years. I acquired some means, had time to reflect, and I thought that would be a perfect time to go study Japan seriously. The initial interesting problem that I confronted when I said, okay, I'm going to study Japan, was that you can't study Japan in Japan. There are no universities in Japan that have a discipline called Japan Studies. So, I had to find it elsewhere. And I found it all over the world, but some of the best ones were in the United States. I think uh, probably a vestige of World War II and the Cold War, when the United States used to prepare a lot more uh, in conflict, and in whenever they thought they would be potentially occupying a place or a people, they studied it very vigorously. So there are these sort of pockets of Japan studies in the US and also in the UK. uh, I'm sure it exists in places like Russia too, but so I went there to study Japan, and it was just an eye-opening experience, really. uh,
That's really
changed my
interesting. But it's like the expression, you can't see the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
When you're immersed in something, it's very difficult to see it in an objective way, right?
Yes, yes.
But then again, I grew up in Hawaii. Hawaii has some of the best Hawaiian culture studies, Hawaiian history studies in Hawaii. And
Hmm.
so that is odd that in Japan you can't dive deep into cultural studies at university. That
Yeah,
is,
I think the difference may be Hawaii, experienced colonialism, right? Maybe it's experiencing it now as well. I don't know. But if it is occupied and its identity is diluted, then there is a period in time, maybe a little bit like what's happening in the United States, where the people that felt oppressed or denied or uh, made invisible, wanting to define state and express themselves, and you do that partially through study. Japan has the opposite situation, which is that in order to avoid colonialism, in the 19th century, it unified Japan, whereas it was diverse with many languages spoken, many kings, and in a way, it obliterated the diversity. So everybody thinks that they are monoracial, mono-ideological, mono-religious. That is more a result of uh, cultures being erased. So once you kind of are in this sort of mindset that you belong to this one thing, you don't want to study that one thing to a point where you start to understand that it's not one thing. And it's so sort of psychologically confusing. So I think in Japan, there's not by chance but more by design, there isn't really a a desire or a tendency to want to reflect on what Japan is or where it came from or how it came about.
oh, that's
Uh,
really
it-
interesting. Yeah, no, fantastic.
yeah, I'm
Um,
sorry, maybe I'm getting too
no,
much
no,
into the,
that's
but
perfect.
yeah,
I think a good follow-on from that idea is to talk about your interview that you did with
yeah,
in her recent video.
right,
Can you introduce that to us? Like
uh,
the interview is all in Japanese, available
right,
on YouTube.
right.
Can you talk a bit in English about what you talked about
With I.
with
Okay,
I?
so I is this Japanese talent, singer-songwriter. She's also of multicultural heritage. Her parentage has some Italian American in her, and also from father from Kagoshima. And I got to know her in my previous occupation, where I was head of entertainment marketing at Coca-Cola, and we used to make Coke songs. You probably heard of Coke songs a few times in your life. So one of the songs that I made a couple songs with her, but so I got to know her very well. It's already been probably 15 years of association, but we've kept in touch. And recently, because I started becoming more interested in exploring the, topic of diversity in Japan, and also trying to help Japan, learn about global issues that's related to questions about diversity and identity. When she created this song called Not So Different, we worked with her to try to turn it into content, kind of like a YouTube program with singing, talking, and singing. And the song is really about how everybody is unique and special in their own way. But when you focus on differences, you should notice that you're actually not so different. That there is more constructive and inclusiveness in thinking about commonality. So that was the song, and it it she she wrote and produced the song way before kind of the height of U.S. and European divisiveness, but it really is timely now to think about what she's singing about. So we talked about it throughout the video, and also introduced the song for the first time in Japan.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
really, it's a great interview. And in the video, you're talking about her as a trailblazer.
right.
Can you introduce that idea a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. Joy, you may appreciate that when you're creating content, it always comes with financial costs. So as much as possible, I learned through my experience at Coke that you need to find patrons that are interested in supporting, your objective and your communication goals. So for this one with we found a patron in Salesforce. It's a San Francisco company. I don't know if you're familiar with the firm, but Mark Benioff, the founder, is very serious about equality, inclusiveness, etc. So the match was right for the kind of song that I wanted to get out there, and the kind of ideas that Salesforce respects and wants to promote. So they paid for it. And the title of Mark Benioff's recent bestseller book is called Trailblazer. And it's all about individuals and companies that believe in a set of values, and they're willing to put the values before financial and personal gain. And those type of people are called trailblazers because they make a path in a place where there is no path, or in roads that are less trodden. So I felt that it really matched what I was trying to do. Entertainment industry in Japan can be very, very superficial, maybe like anywhere else in the world. But there is a tendency here to like, ooh, don't talk about diversity, or don't bring issues about racial strife, or national strife. Just sing. Or it's sort of like what I think some president told a basketball player in the United States: just dribble. So it was good to find a powerfully financially backed patron who believed in the values and supported us in this endeavor to create this content.
Yeah.
But the word trailblazer came actually from Salesforce, so thank you, Salesforce.
Right. Well, that's really interesting, but also it's really important. And I think this comes up in the documentary as well, which we're going to talk
Yes,
about, with finding funding for culture, finding
yes,
funding for
yes,
ethical work or
yes,
moral work. And
yes.
and she talks about that, which we're going to talk about a little bit later.
Okay.
And I noticed that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you can't not notice that when you watch your video about happiness and you
Mm-hmm.
see some product placement there.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable, but
Okay.
it's like when I talked to Tova,
Yeah.
about sustainable business consulting, right?
Yeah.
You have to choose your battles, right?
Yes.
You
Yes.
have to secure funding because you need funding to be
Mm-hmm.
sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
And you might see problems everywhere, but
Mm-hmm.
you have to choose a balance of, I'm going to focus on this for sustainability. This is going to improve my way to get my message out. And
Yeah.
I don't want to say compromise, but you have to compromise, of course, in the
Yeah,
sustainable business world as well,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So,
yeah. No, I
how,
buy that.
yeah, how do you do that in your line
Wow.
of work? You have to choose your
Mm,
battles, right?
you do. I learned the tricks of the trade for sure at Coca-Cola. Uh, I must say that uh, I'm not there anymore, so I can be very blunt about it. I very much took advantage of what Coca-Cola was stating as their belief, which was that kind of we are the world, and the glass is half full, and we value people from all over the world and the differences that they exhibit. So I kind of held them to it as I was producing the music and the content. Uh, I was also very mindful that there were elements within a huge corporation like that are like saying, Chuk, it's not about the band, it's about the brand. Uh, I've gotten into some very tense situations with powers that be that could like take me off projects, who are like saying, don't focus so much on the message and the artist, you know, pay more attention to whether this thing is moving the product. And I'm starting to be able to, in my age and maybe a little bit of wisdom that I've gained along the way, to be able to insist with data and quantitative and qualitative research point to say, hey, you know what? Just wait a second. You might want to just move that product off the shelf, but don't think you are so special. There are many similar products at the similar price point and the similar uh, goods and services that these products provide. And consumers are savvy and mindful people, and they will make a choice based on which products, which brands they identify with. So that's a real opportunity if you are careful to select the kinds of brands that you work with, to hold them accountable to what they're saying. It's not easy. It's not easy, and sometimes at the end of the day, okay, well, it is what it is. This product or these people that are selling this product or this service are who they are, and I just can't work with that anymore. Uh, you have to move on and find others. Salesforce, interestingly enough, I'm not here to plug Salesforce, but empirically, if you look at the kinds of things that the company has done, they have taken stances and positions, even politically, that is potentially damaging to their business, but they insisted on the value being paramount. And you can see evidences of that. I don't want to like get too much into that. But so then when you see companies or entities stand by their values, well, then, you also kind of think, I should work with these people. I should maybe even help them in their communication and messaging, because the values that they're trying to protect or and make paramount over their business are important ones. So, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
that's
rambling.
no, no, that's so important and so interesting. And I
Hmm.
appreciate your point of view from someone on the inside. And
Yeah.
I think I have to admit it, when I worked at university and I was doing research and doing papers and stuff, kind of part time, but not as a business,
Yeah.
I was an idealist, right? And I would say, I would never work with that company because la la la, you know? And
Yeah.
then as I've started with my own company and I have really kind of turned a corner on this, and I realized the value of small battles, right? Like if you can get a major company to change, like we know a major fast food company, when they started offering children apple slices, they became the biggest buyer of apples in the world. When
Hmm.
a major coffee company changes to fair trade, they change the entire world market for coffee.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is so much value in winning small battles.
Yes.
And
Like you said,
yeah,
we have to pick the battles for
yes,
sure.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. On that point, there's I was thinking you said, change the company or, maybe nudge them in the right direction. I think that's true and that's possible. When you are looking for patrons or matrons, I don't like the sexist language of patronage, but when you are looking for supporters, look for the ones that share the values with you. It's really hard to change a behemoth of a huge global corporations with a facade of values, but you can find a corporation that has really core values, and you do have to see the you have to see through the hypocrisy. And if it's too blatant,
Yeah.
and if it's just so obvious, walk away. There are others. There are others.
I want to get into this amazing
Yeah.
documentary that you've
Thank
developed, but I just want one more little point on this,
you.
that in my research with companies, I am so impressed when I talk to companies that are transparent about their good points and bad points, and companies that are reassessing what they want to do and what they are doing, where they want to be in terms of sustainability or helping environment or helping people or
Yeah.
helping their staff, and where they are, and
Yeah.
reassessing that. And that's pretty much all we can ask for, is
Yeah.
that they make an aim, they reassess, they try to do
Yeah.
better, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think so. There's at one time there was a lot of people were talking about CSR,
Yeah.
corporate social responsibility, and now they're talking about shared value, right? The difference is CSV and CSR, corporate shared values, and what are corporate social responsibility. CSR is just what you have to do to clean up after yourself. So if a company is selling a lot of drinks and it's making a lot of, PET bottles or polluting water or something like, yes, expletive, clean up after yourself. Don't think you can be proud about just cleaning up after yourself. It's just what you have to do, So you have to hold them accountable there, and you also kind of have to hold them accountable to, there's nothing to be proud of and saying, look at me, about just fulfilling your responsibilities. But if you're willing to put values ahead of your business, and you're trying to like make the business sustainable by making sure that the business goals and the social goals mesh and have a shared value, well, then you can celebrate, and then you can say, look at what we accomplished. Just creating a landfill out of the garbage that you made and saying, look, it looks clean now. Uh, you know, please, please. But if you've created life out of a place that didn't have life before, or if you've stopped a kind of a business service or a product or a practice because you've really said, you know what, I'm lying to myself about the sustainability of all of this. I'm lying to myself about what value I'm really providing my consumers. Well, then you've got something.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think consumers are now very savvy. And
Yes.
consumers have very good internet skills. You're in the IT world now, where you can check information. And if a company
Yeah.
says they're doing it, I think they better be doing it, because consumers can find out, right?
That's right. That's
Very
right.
easily. So
Right.
transparency is certainly in the favor of any brand right
Right.
now, I would
Right.
say.
And if they can't self-regulate transparency, you know what, then, entities like government or civil society need to step in and hold them accountable to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate that. I really want to talk about your beautiful documentary,
Thank you.
Ainu My Voice.
Yes.
So can you introduce it for us, this project?
Okay. So Ainu My Voice is part of a documentary series that I created about 3 years ago called Future is Mine. It was content that I wanted to create that was sustainable and also kind of valuable from a messaging point of view to the media that we own at 3 Minute called Mine. So it was kind of like a pun in words to say the future is mine. The reason I came up with the series was because when we did focus group research and quantitative research on our target audience, women between ages 20 and 40 in Japan, we have about 6 million viewers, we found that 80% of them were most concerned about their future. They felt very insecure about it. They didn't really even know how to quite think about envisioning their own future because of all the constraints and the hurdles that they see around them at all times. It's an uphill battle. How can you envision a brighter world if your daily life is so constrained? So I wanted to introduce content that act as touchstones so that they can vicariously or through another woman and her journey of self-empowerment envision themselves doing something similar. The futures that any woman envisions are different from one woman to the other, but the process by which they realize it is not so different. So that's the storytelling I wanted to do. So there were a series that I started. The Ainu Voice is the seventh and the latest of the series. It coincided with my interest in diversity, so that I was able to choose the main character of the Future is Mine series to be an Ainu woman and help chronicle her journey of empowerment. So the story is about a 30-something-year-old Ainu woman very much having problems in life that is common to many modern women from across all cultures all over the world, and see how she journeys to envision a future for herself and takes a step that gets her closer to it and gets empowered through that process so that she can continue that journey. It's the story about. She's an oral historian. The Ainu culture has no writing, so the oral chronicling of history and tradition is really, really important. And yet the Ainu culture is facing the lack of people who are able to converse in Ainu, let alone sing and tell oral stories. And then two, in their current they are at the bottom ladder of the economic success story in modern Japan of, what promulgation of culture and tradition when you're just suffering and struggling in your daily life, kind of thing. So she was a really interesting and encouraging woman to follow.
Yeah, and I think very relatable as well
Yeah.
in
Yes.
her real life transition. Um, so we have a quick question.
Okay.
Is there a link for Future is Mind? I Googled it but can't find it. The link should be in the description below. But yes, if you search, how was the best way to find it on YouTube?
I think if you go to if you type in "Future is Mine"
Yeah.
in Romaji
Mm-hmm.
in Roman characters, you can also type in Ainu My Voice, AINU My Voice, and you will find the
Yeah.
documentary. Once you find one, I think you can find the other seven.
Yeah, I found it by searching on YouTube instead of
Uh-huh.
Google. So
Ah,
if you're searching for it, just wait. The link will be below,
yeah.
and you can watch it after this
Yeah,
live stream.
please watch it after. You can also go to the media called Mine, Mine, and there's a kind of it's stacked in there as well.
Yeah, so I've watched it, and it's free for anybody to watch it, and it has English subtitles. It's really beautifully done. It's a very powerful story, but like I said, very relatable.
Yeah,
And so she uh, had a mother and sister who were dancers.
right. She comes from a part of Hokkaido in eastern Hokkaido called Akan, Akan. I recommend anybody watching this to go visit the place because it's very magical and special. It's a lake mountainous area. It's a national park in Japan, and there is an Ainu enclave there, and they are how do you say, trying to attain financial independence and sustainability through practicing Ainu traditions as part of tourism. So her mother and sister, many relatives were Ainu dancers and singers. Her grandfather was an Ainu scholar, and he also transcribed and wrote a lot of the Ainu oral tradition stories and put them into books, which are now available for the common reader to learn about. Yeah, so she comes from a really, core Ainu tradition family.
Yeah, it was really interesting. And then talking about how very similar to indigenous cultures around the world, the Ainu believed that God was present in all things.
Right.
Their language, their culture was pretty much illegal at a
Yes.
certain point, right?
Yes. It was, there was concerted government policy directives to obliterate or erase Ainu culture and traditions. And even if it was not sort of like, if you speak it, you are in jail kind of situation, they did create, for example, the kids were all put into Japanese schools and only taught Japanese. You also had discrimination if you are too overtly Ainu. So, parents who wish only the best for their children would not encourage children to learn Ainu languages and things like that. So yeah, the situation created by modern Japan very much forced the Ainus to kind of retreat into themselves, so much to the point where they lost their languages, lost their traditions. And as Ria was growing up, although she knew she had Ainu roots, she wanted to turn away from it. She didn't, it was associated with pain and bullying and things like that. So only in her young adult life did she find comfort and nourishment in her own culture, and then she began to pursue it.
Yeah. Like even in her story, she says she appreciated it as a child and she was supported by her community, but then in elementary school, she was bullied a little bit about
Yeah,
being Ainu. And
yeah,
then in university, she again found support in Sapporo
yes,
University, right?
that's right. There is a really wonderful professor by the name of Professor Honda Yuko in the Sapporo University in Hokkaido, and she founded an Ainu scholarship fund. So she seeks out people of Ainu heritage and provides them free education for 4 years. They can study whatever they want, but the caveat is that they also have to learn about Ainu culture and language and etc. Dia really thrived and blossomed in that environment, so much so that she became, very, very accomplished as an Ainu oral historian, and she even performed in front of Emperor Heisei. So, the scholarship is working.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And that's so great to hear that it is, like you said, it was difficult to study Japanese studies when you were in university, but it's
Yes,
great to hear that Ainu heritage and Ainu culture is being preserved at least at Sapporo University by,
that's right.
yeah.
That's right. Right. Yeah.
So she had this encouragement at university, and the professor in the video says they started the scholarship fund in 2010, and
Mm-hmm.
she was committed to live as an Ainu,
Mm-hmm.
and she showed a lot of progress.
Right.
But when she started the program, she didn't know anything about
She
her
didn't.
own culture.
She didn't. She knew some songs, she knew the dances, but she certainly hadn't acquired the Ainu language. By then, her grandparents were long gone, and they spoke Japanese at home. Probably parents saying, "Oh, it's more important for this child's future that they be, more Japanese than Ainu or something like that." So yeah, the only thing she knew about Ainu was that she had Ainu roots. So she had to learn it from scratch pretty much, except for the singing and dancing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that part in the documentary where I'm getting ahead of myself, but when she kind of has a modern twist
Mm-hmm.
on how the Ainu language is used, but she's using it in a real way as
Yes.
communication.
Yes. Yes.
And that's a really powerful part of
It
the
is.
film. for
you
sure.
do what you can within the limitations that you are dealt with, and she really is trying hard now. I think I'm pleased that the opportunity of that personal empowerment journey that we provided her, in no small part, allowed her to be more committed to her arts, and also she became a lot more creative in the way that she was pursuing those arts. Like, she had this epiphany that Ainu culture, unless it keeps generating new content, is dead. It's kind of like studying Latin or ancient Greek. Nobody speaks it anymore. Yeah, if you went to an elite university, you could study it, but then what do you ever do with it? You certainly don't like create poetry in ancient Greek or Latin. But she went after this journey uh, and created a new Ainu song. It was just something to behold. I really recommend everybody to watch it.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I really recommend it.
Yeah,
Let's step back a little bit in her
sure.
story. So after university,
Hmm.
she got married and had a baby.
Yeah,
And for her, that was a transitional moment. Can you
yes.
explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, so in her early childhood, she kind of enjoyed playing and dancing and singing with her mothers and sisters and relatives, because they were performing for tourists, and she felt very much part of the community. As she grew up and went to Japanese school, she found that her Ainu-ness was a source of potential pain and discrimination, bullying, etc. So once she started studying again Ainu culture in university, she just like embraced it again. But then reality sets in to anyone in this modern world once they're out of that sort of idealistic university environment. If you were fortunate enough to have had that idealistic university environment, but once you get out of it, oh, I got to make a living, I got to pay rent, I have to sell sugar water, uh, you know, what, whatever you have to do, and then you're kind of confronted with, I learned and was immersed in all these wonderful things, but it has nothing to do with my life anymore. And if I want to pursue those things, in her case, I knew oral history, she couldn't make a living on it, and she would even perform in front of the emperor and not be paid anything. Like, aren't you glad you're performing in front of the emperor? So, okay, we'll pay your bus fare, but, congratulations, right? What happens next? Nothing, nothing. And then she gets married, and despite the fact that she married, a kind of like an equivalent of an Ainu prince, it's a very male-dominated society. One of the negative things that Ainu culture learned in modernization was patriarchy, whereas it used to be a matriarchy. It kind of switched to only men, or men are more important. So it was more important for her to like serve her husband or just be a mother. All these kind of like modern female constraints again was like removing her from her passion and pursuit of her art. Uh, so this trip again kind of like said, okay, I have to and I can figure out how to balance both, not balance, you know, male patriarchal values, but how do I balance family and the pursuit of my art? And I think she's kind of on her way to being able to make that part sustainable.
So she was invited, and maybe you know this process better, of course. You set up her invitation
Yes.
at an American tribe. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. This kind of loops back in the idea of that you have to find a patron or a sponsor or somebody who believes in what you're doing. In this case, it was Hard Rock. Hard Rock from all the cafes and hotels and casinos that they have all over the world. It's a huge, huge company based in Florida. Uh, Hard Rock is owned by the Seminole tribe of Florida. And I knew this, so when I had this idea about doing a Future's Mind story about an Ainu woman, even before meeting the Ainu woman, I thought, hey, if I could find a woman who's interested in finding a sustainable way to maintain or evolve Ainu culture, she should learn from her counterparts who are relatively successful in doing that. They have one foot in contemporary world where they find a way to generate cash and livelihood for their people, and on the other hand, the other foot is firmly placed on how do they sustain, maintain, and progress their culture, and that was the Seminole tribe. Just amazing, amazing people based in southern Florida. So she went to visit them. And if you see the documentary, make sure you have some tissues with you, because there are these moments where you really realize that they're connecting and empowering each other.
Yeah.
That's another important thing, I think, for women or for people.
Yeah.
That, when you see another struggling through something that you may have struggled through, it's on you to reach out.
Yeah. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
One of the points about funding is so
Yeah.
interesting, right? And I remember this discussion about giving land back to
Yeah.
Native American people.
Yes.
And when they chose to make commercial enterprises and started making money,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of white Americans resented that.
Yeah.
Right? But
Yeah.
this is a way to fund your culture. And in the comments for the documentary, I saw a really interesting comment from a New Zealander talking
Mm-hmm.
about how Maoris in Auckland have also been able to fund their culture. And I mean, this goes back to what we were talking about having a balance in sustainability, that you have to have funding to
Yes.
be sustainable, right?
Yes.
So this part was so interesting. Do you think there's any chance that the Ainu people will be allowed to have like a theme park or a commercial
Ooh.
money generating thing? I mean,
Ooh. Well,
that's
if we were,
to Rie, that was her dream, right? This is how to
yes.
get funding.
Well, if we were in China right now, I think they would be turning us off from, what I'm about to say. But I think the reason I was able to focus on Rie and the Ainu culture was because Japan finally last year passed the Ainu new law. I don't know what the English translation for that law is, but it's basically a law that recognized finally. This is you're talking 2000, what are we now, 19 last year, finally recognizing the Ainu as the indigenous one of the indigenous people of Japan. Better late than never. And they also instituted within the law that they would budget and support the promulgation of Ainu culture. So they built a huge museum in Hokkaido. You can go visit it now in Nibutani in west central Hokkaido. But there's nowhere in the law that talks about reparations. Whereas the United States and places like New Zealand, even and Australia, do take those steps. They try to give back the land that was taken from the indigenous people. In this case, that the Ainu, I guess they could potentially claim all of Hokkaido, northern territories, a good part of Sakhalin, and maybe even a good part of northeastern Japan. But it's a delicate subject,
It
right?
is, of course, but at least the educational aspect should be possible in Japan, I hope.
Yeah.
So in Hawaii as well, we
Mm-hmm.
have immersion schools.
Yeah.
We have schools where they only speak Hawaiian to make the language alive again, to bring it
Yeah.
back to
Yeah.
reality. And we
Yeah.
saw this in your documentary when she visits a school, right?
Yeah. The Seminole School, right? But they have their own means. When they recovered land and rights in southern Florida, they started, doing tourism business. It eventually evolved into what is it, high stakes bingo and then a casino. So they're generating wealth and they're putting it right back into their society. The Ainus don't have that, it's an opportunity into the future if inbound tourism continues to be important for the Japanese economy, and inbound tourists are starting to focus on this interest in the inherent diversity of Japan, not just, Tokyo, Kyoto, Nara, Japan as it's defined in the, in the government brochures. But if you become interested in, oh, there's this aspect of Japan, and isn't it interesting in this wonderfully beautiful nature reserve of Hokkaido that there are these people who actually are of this land, and then what can we learn from them? How can we go visit them? And if the Ainu then are allowed, empowered to garner, financial gain from that process, yeah, I think they could then begin to fund themselves. It does take societal unity even within the Ainu, and that's lacking, and that's more a result of decades, even centuries of oppression, that they don't have a social structure that is mindful of that, or aiming for that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That part of the video where she meets the tribal chairman and he encourages her not to give up and talks about the fact that he's there shows thanks to his ancestors' struggle. That
Yeah.
it was a very long struggle and you can do it. It's going to be hard, but don't give up. That
Yeah.
is such a powerful part of the film.
Yes, thank you for noticing that. But that is what it takes, and I'm hopeful that women like Leah, she's not prone to thinking that she has any leadership capabilities or capacities, responsibility even. But if women like her, with her acumen and her talents, begin to think about this seriously and learn from their counterparts like the Seminoles, I think there is a kind of hope for their future.
Yeah, wonderful. Let
Yeah.
me address some of the comments so far because we've had some
Yeah.
great ones.
Okay.
Must keep generating new content to keep culture alive. This is so fascinating. Can't wait to watch it. Thank you,
All
Allison.
right. Thank you.
And Lee says, can't wait to watch it. Good topic today. Many people outside Japan still don't know the Ainu. My very good friend is Oki Kano, who is a musician that
yeah.
you must know.
He's in the video.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Molly B says, a lot of whites don't want Indigenous Americans to thrive. I was criticized for my tribal scholarship.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunate.
Allison says, inbound tourists becoming interested in inherent diversity in Japan. So many excellent quotes and perspectives in this talk. Thank you, Allison.
Let me make this guy stop the vacuum cleaner.
Okay, yeah, please. Yeah, so I would encourage everyone. Aaron, thank you for your comments. That is a powerful message. Every one of our ancestors as survivors and thrives. Yeah, thank you for your comments, Aaron. I saw your question before. Can you ask questions and comment? Yes, definitely.
Done.
Please dive in. Yeah, thank you so much.
Gomen
No,
nasai.
this is live stream reality, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So going back to, let's see, where did we leave off? So she went to Florida.
Yeah.
She met the tribal leaders. She saw how they were generating income to support their culture, right?
Yes.
Of course, there's always going to be a push and pull, right? About making money and diluting cultural value. This is something we often talk about in tourism, right? Sustainable tourism. Authenticity,
Yes.
right? So if you offer it to international guests, can you retain authenticity? This is always a challenge. I
Yes.
think your documentary just raised so many important issues related to Ainu culture and diversity. But yeah, anything else you want to talk about in terms of
About
authenticity or?
authenticity. Well, yeah, authenticity isn't about finding one answer or defining something in a monolithical, monoethnic, monoracial, monoideological way. Authenticity is to find the diversity within and all the different cultural and historical influences that a culture has received. Because once it starts believing that the authentic can be defined and pictured in one frame, uh, it becomes not authentic. And that's sort of what I'm referring to. I think inbound tourists who are coming to Japan for the second, third time realize that there is more to just looking at the geisha and saying this is Japan, or going to the I don't know the Nara Big Buddha and saying this is Japan. No, the right way to say that this is an aspect of Japan. And when I was saying, I think I was telling you before we started this thing that I became interested because I was told all my life that I'm not Japanese or that I don't belong in Japan. I became very interested in learning about what Japan is. And then I found that it's a very modern construct that some very, very smart people in western part of Japan who were being faced with colonial threats put together a policy based on what they learned in places like Europe, Austria, or even the United States, to how do you unify a diverse people so that they feel like they need to bound together and protect themselves. And that was a process of wiping out what is different about them, making them feel like they belong to one family, one father, the emperor. And if he said, son, I'm sorry, but I need you to step out of the house and protect it, you did it. But, times have changed. And right now, if you maintain that sort of identity about Japan or about a people, then you're about to perish because it's not sustainable. I mean, Japan is aging. If it doesn't want to accept the other, like people coming here to work, if it doesn't want to distinguish itself as multi-layered, it's not going to last. I mean, you just know that, in due time, everybody's just going to perish because you're just going to be old and, uh, you know, you're gone, right? Well, it's an opportunity for Japan to then say, oh, I see, at that time we needed to bound, and for better or for worse, we bound together by wiping out our differences. Maybe this is an opportunity in finding the authenticity about Japan through history and exploration, anthropology, archaeology, say, oh my God, we come from so many places around the world. Mankind didn't evolve out of the Japanese archipelago. We do know that. It's a scientific fact, anthropological fact. Well, then where did we come from? At what periods? And how did we mix? And how did we come to all live together in these islands? When was it defined as a border? When did we establish this figurehead called the emperor? And where did that family come from? I think all these things are in our, you know, will to be sustainable as a society, an absolute must to explore and to learn, because if we don't, we will just keep on this path and it's a dead end path. Unless Japan realizes that it's connected through its history and through its people to all of the world, and to say you can't come in because you're not from here is nonsense, Japan will perish. If I may not overstate it enough.
No, that's so important to talk about, and so important from your point of view, because the way that you grew up in Japan, the way that you experienced Japan from the outside and then decided to come back, the way that you experience Japan now by having half kids or multicultural, multilingual kids.
Right.
And having a Japanese wife, and
Right.
there's so many things you're dealing with, not only in the past but in the present. And
That's right.
and I think what you're doing with media, bringing these diversity focused stories, empowerment stories to the mainstream, is hugely powerful and
Thank you.
very important.
Thank you.
So
Thank
thank
you.
you so much.
I want to leave a little bit of a mark of me having existed.
Yeah, I think you are.
With
I
my
think you
kids.
are.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, we have a nice question right now. So you think
Yeah.
Japan is doing a good job in keeping up with China in technology and other aspects of sustainability in society? She,
Well,
mhm.
yeah. I don't think Japan is doing a good job keeping up relations with its neighbors. So no, I don't think it's less about technology and economy than to realize that you are interdependent, and you need to figure out how to work together. It's not doing that. It's
Yeah,
not doing that. It's the other, and they're a problem, we are not a problem kind of attitude. That's not sustainable.
yeah.
That's not
We
sustainable.
we have only 5 more minutes, and
Yeah.
already people are asking for us to do a part two.
Have to find a quieter environment that doesn't freak out
Maybe
Joy because
next
of
time,
the
next time
vacuum
I
cleaner
will
comes
get you in a quieter room. Yeah.
in a pod, in an isolated monolithic pod.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Aaron's asking about your experience now,
yeah,
because you grew up, you had a set of experiences. Now you're seeing Japan many years later.
yeah.
So have you seen progress in terms of
Oh, so done. Yeah, but
diversity?
I think more people are interested and willing to consider the inherent diversity of Japan. There was a period when I would like start talking about the roots of the emperor's family, and people would say, "Okay, thank you very much. I need to move on," and they want to get up and leave. Uh, but more people are becoming interested in, what is Japan about. There are more people interested in doing DNA tests about their families, and they're finding, oh my God, I have so much coming from this part of Asia or that part of Asia, or I'm even like remotely, related to Europe or the Pacific Islands. So that's progress, I think. I also think that as more Japanese are, traveling abroad and things like that, there is these opportunities to view yourself from afar, and you do get to see, bigger issues. So I'm there. And like some people said, aren't you lucky? I had a princess tell me one time that, don't worry about your kids and their multi, kind of, I don't know what you call it, cultural, ethnic background, uh, because nowadays it's cool, you know. I think that's the wrong way to recognize progress. I think it would be cool when everybody says, no matter what the situation is, any child is half mother, half father, that's it. If you start saying this one is half or this one is double, some half kids counter it by saying, no, I'm double. You're like saying that there is something, a touchstone of purity, and then you're trying to like define yourself around that. That touchstone of purity is fake. It's not true. It's empirically incorrect.
That is so interesting and important. I'm raising my kids in the same way that you were raised in Japan. They are very bilingual, bicultural. They feel Japanese, yet they do not have an ounce of Japanese blood. Both of their parents are foreign, but they're born and raised here, and they will never be Japanese in terms
Well,
of the way Japanese see them. But your children are Japanese in terms of their blood and their passport, right?
well,
It's
the part I'm just caution you is blood is not the way to think about it, because
I
blood is
agree.
red and it comes from everywhere. And just because it's 20% that or 5% this or 2% this, it doesn't mean that the 95% is what it is. It's
Yeah.
not. It's all of it. So there is, I kind of say, I'm a hyphen, I'm a Russian Japanese. There is no such thing as a Japanese Japanese. Everybody is from somewhere.
Yeah.
You just don't know it. You haven't had the opportunity to study and to illustrate your family roots.
Definitely. And we were talking a little bit before we went live how, growing up in Hawaii as a white Westerner and being called Haole, and then being a gaijin in Japan, and you have to just find your place, you're comfortable with yourself. and
Yes.
and that's what I'm trying to pass on to my kids. They might feel Japanese. People don't think they're Japanese, but if they feel they're Japanese, I think they should own it,
Yeah.
because that's their reality, that's their truth.
Right.
right?
The first letter in identity is I. You have to define it yourself. Don't let others do it.
That's right. And on that note, we have less than 1 minute now. So
Aye. Okay.
I'd like to send people to watch the interview that you did with on diversity, because I think that shows a really nice interaction in terms of pop singer who is also trying to find out how she identifies as a Japanese who's not a typical Japanese, maybe, but she's also having a very big influence on pop culture. So that is a very powerful interview inside the music video. And definitely, if you're watching this, you have to watch Ainu My Voice. And Chuk, thank you so much for making that available online.
ありがとう。
Yeah, so everybody can watch it. And it has English subtitles. It's fantastic.
Please, everybody watch it and put some comments down below.
Yeah, for sure. So
There's about 10% of the comments that says this is a fake story.
Is it? No, really? I haven't seen that.
The Ainus don't exist, and that don't buy into the lie.
Oh no. Can you leave us with a positive comment of inspiration in the last quote from you as we leave this?
Oh my God. Okay. Well,
no pressure.
There's power in recognizing your inherent diversity. I think when you look within, it's a window to the universe. So everybody, don't forget to look within.
I love that. Look within. Find your truth.
Yes.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Chuk. Thank you for joining. And thank you, everybody, for your wonderful questions and comments. And please join us again tomorrow. I'm not sure what time. Check the schedule. See you tomorrow. Have a good day, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Ciao. Ciao.